Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, March the 25th, 2024. Today I want to talk about the attack on Crocus City Hall in Krasnogorsk near Moscow, in which there was a group of terrorists. I think that most of them were Russian citizens, and they attacked this music venue, and they didn't just kill a lot of people, they set fire to things, and I believe something like 150 people in that region were killed in the attack. So I want to consider what might have happened astrologically, looking at the horoscope of the event and the horoscope of Krasnogorsk. Actually, Krasnogorsk has several horoscopes. It was, I believe, founded in 1932, and it became a city in 1940. So potentially I've got two horoscopes there for Krasnogorsk. I don't have times of foundation for Krasnogorsk, but I do have midday charts. So that is one thing I want to look at. I want to look at the full moon and new moon prior to the attack to see if we get any hints about what might have been going on. But before I do all that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, March the 25th, 2024. And of course, the big event today is the fact that we do have a full moon. It's an eclipse. It's an apulse eclipse in the jargon. You can see it. You can see it here. This is the chart, by the way, for noon today, set for New York, noon, March 25th, 2024. You can see that the moon is at 9 Libra at midday. The sun is at 5 Aries. So the new moon has already happened at noon. I mean, in terms of exactly when the new moon happened, London time, full moon eclipse, exactly when the full moon eclipse happened, it was 7 a.m. London time, which would be, 3 a.m. New York time, and that would be midnight, very beginning of the day if you're in, say, Los Angeles or Portland, Oregon, or Vancouver, Canada, or indeed Vancouver, Washington. If you are in Australia, New Zealand, well, it won't be until, early evening, possibly, that the eclipse happens. So when you've got an eclipse like this, it's not total, it's apulse, but you have a sense that perhaps you can see the truth about the matter. And that's what today is all about, seeing the truth, realizing things for what they really are. And that's something I always say about full moons. We see the full picture. But just because the truth is available to us doesn't mean we're actually going to register it. It's just available, that's all. And we have here with this full moon the clash between the moon in Libra and the sun in Aries. That is a big clash because we've got two very different principles. The moon in Aries is perhaps the principle of adaptation, compromise, trying to understand other people's points of view, trying to be reasonable. And the sun in Aries, by contrast, is about taking the initiative, maybe about jumping to conclusions, not giving people too much time to talk, not trying to find too much compromise. We have to take action. So we have to balance these contradicting principles of action and compromise with this full moon. And we have to ask, which is the one to go for, which is more profitable and which is right for us. Well, when you've got an eclipse, the North Node and the South Node will be involved by definition. And the Sun in Aries is close to the North Node, and the Moon in Libra is close to the South Node. So that might suggest, if you take the North Node as being the way forward and the South Node as being the line of least resistance, that in the end, our responsibility may be to take the initiative. We can't spend all day trying to compromise, trying to make everyone happy. At a certain point, we may have to take a stand. However, I am not advocating rash action. You always do have to consider, the overall situation. And one thing about this eclipse, which I have already mentioned, is the fact that it is making a semisquare to Uranus. The Sun in Aries is around 45 degrees to Uranus, and that colours the eclipse. What tells us something about what it is actually like. And Uranus is quite an unstable influence. It can be about sudden action, things happening out of the blue, things happening that we really hadn't planned for. And that may say something about today. Perhaps hearing the truth is tough. Perhaps it's a bit of a shock. So do consider that possibility. And because the Sun is semisquare Uranus, aside from the fact that there is a full moon eclipse, things may not be particularly stable today. There may be happenings. Moon in Libra, yes, Moon in Libra is trying to create some kind of stability, particularly on a social nature, but it's going to find it really hard. And it may be that actually there are certain things that do need to be shaken up. And at the same time, Venus is making a semisquare to Pluto. Venus at noon is 17 Pisces. Pluto is at around 2 Aquarius. So Venus semisquare Pluto. Venus is a planet that has a lot to do with relationships. Semisquare Pluto, past struggles perhaps. That's one way of looking at it. Who is in control? It may also be about emotional intensity. Perhaps. Venus is in Pisces. Okay, Pluto is in Aquarius. It is that kind of clash. How much emotion do we want in any relationship? Is a lot of emotion, at a certain point, it could be just too much of a good thing. So in terms of relationships, particularly close relationships, we perhaps need to be careful that things don't get out of control. That is the broad picture in terms of the planetary aspects. The Sun is on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. You can see there is Venus at 17 Pisces, Mercury is at 24 Aries, and Mercury is around 19 degrees from the Sun, and Venus is around 19 degrees from the Sun also. So we can therefore say that Sun is conjunct the Mercury-Venus midpoint. And that conjunction really is pretty fortunate. It's a conjunction that is connected with creativity. If we have particular skills, talents, particularly artistic talents, business talents, then now might be the time to bring them out into the open. Another midpoint I should mention is Mercury being on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. So there is Mercury, 24 Aries, there's Uranus, there's Neptune, and Mercury is on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. Reinhold Ebertin, when he describes the pair of Uranus and Neptune, he comes up with this wonderful phrase, the elimination of a waking consciousness. So Mercury being on the Mercury-Neptune midpoint may suggest that at times we are not fully aware of what is going on. We perhaps go into a daze, or we have just moments where we don't quite know what's going on, where we are, I won't say asleep or comatose, but just we flip out into somewhere else. And that might be fun, it might be inspiring, but it might be dangerous. So it's important to concentrate, and with Mercury conjunct the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, we need to avoid things or situations that elevate our risk of our waking conscious being suddenly eliminated. So taking drugs is always a bad idea, but taking drugs today, okay, I understand some people have to take drugs for medicinal reasons, but I'm talking more about recreational reasons. Of course, I'm speaking from Washington State, where you can buy cannabis in shops. It is essentially legal. So it kind of depends where you are. Also, alcohol, watch out for that. Not a good day for drinking today. You might find that your tolerance isn't as good as you thought it was with Mercury on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. I want to finish by looking at the heliocentric picture, by looking at the positions of the planets today from the perspective of the Sun, if we put the Sun in the middle of the solar system. I am not suggesting that we're going to find anything spectacular here. I just feel that we need to just keep track of what is going on from a heliocentric perspective. So let's look at the heliocentric picture. So there we have the heliocentric chart. Remember, there's no moon, because from the Sun's perspective, the Earth and the moon are in the same place, and there is no ascendant. So we see the Earth there. Earth is making a sextile aspect to Mercury. Mercury is a fast mover. Now you might think that this sextile aspect is separating, but Mercury, I think at the moment, is moving 6 degrees a day from a heliocentric perspective, because it takes around 88 days for Mercury to move around the Sun. So yes, there is Earth-Mercury sextile today, and that should be good for communication. It should be good for thinking, especially on a sort of collective level, trying to understand what is going on in the world. And governments may take the opportunity to try to communicate their message, remembering also that Mercury is Mercury is at 6 Leo, so Mercury is moving towards an opposition with Mars. So that gives a slightly different complexion to it. So with heliocentric Mercury opposition heliocentric Mars, that could be about angry communication. Again, with heliocentric charts, I think we're talking more about the collective rather than anything too personal. And so we might observe angry communication, people desperate to get their message across, and perhaps being annoyed if people refuse to accept this message. And again, that may go back to governments. Governments really want to get us to believe something, and they kind of get angry if we don't. And so that is something perhaps that we should consider. Okay, that's the overall position of the planets today, both from a geocentric and a heliocentric perspective. And what I want to do now is look at the astrology of the 12 signs. So let me just put this back to the geocentric chart. And these are my forecasts for today, which is Monday, March the 25th, 2024. Aries, you can't help but notice a full moon. The sun is in your sign. The moon is in your opposite sign of Libra. For many Arians, it might be a moment of realization where you understand the truth about a particular relationship. You can see someone for what they are. You start to understand what kind of impact they are having on you, and it may occur to you that action is required. Now, does that necessarily mean that you are going to take action? Not necessarily. I think that you are going to feel a strong push to compromise. This is because the moon is in Libra. It's in your opposite sign. You understand that other people have a big impact on you, and you might take the view that if you are too strident, that might cause upset and that might damage your position in some way. And there's a sort of worry there. I know this doesn't really sound typical Aries, but you do have to understand your concerns. You also have to start to consider what is the right thing to do. It is certainly true that you've got to consider other people. I mean, they do matter. You can't just offend people just for the sake of it. But at the same time, the sun is moving through your sign. It's the Aries season, and you are expected ultimately to take the initiative and do what is right, especially as the North Node is also moving through Aries. The North Node is the direction you should be going in, and there may come a point where you have to take the initiative, where you have to risk hurting people's feelings. That doesn't mean to say that you have to hurt anyone's feelings. It may not be necessary, because at the moment you have good social skills. You have something about you that is actually quite optimistic. You can make people feel good about themselves. And this has been going on for quite a long time, Aries. And you just know how to give people the impression that your view of the world is not just the right view of the world, but it's also in a way a happy view of the world. I know that sounds a bit weird, a happy view of the world, but it's not about just telling people that they should do something. It's about giving people a choice. I read that somewhere, or someone told me that if you want to get someone to do something, you give them a choice, even if that choice is fake. You kind of say, well, you can do this, or you can do that, or you can do that. What would you like to do? And then, of course, you can use a bit of manipulation to push them in the choice that you want them to follow. And you can present them with all the advantages of taking that particular choice. And I think you will do it with enormous skill. Finally, I should say something about relationships. Well, today, Venus, which is the ruler of Libra, which is your opposite sign, Venus is semisquare Pluto. And this means that some of the people close to you may be feeling a bit intense, a bit over-emotional, and they may be unwilling to reveal their true selves. It might be as if they're holding something back. This is a temporary situation, but I think it might be an annoying situation as well, because if you're a typical Aries, you like everything to be open, honest, and above board. And if someone is holding something back, you want to know why. I would suggest you exercise a little bit of tact. And remember, it's probably just a temporary situation. Give people time to understand themselves, and I think when they're ready, they will tell you what's on their mind. Taurus. Well, if you have just been listening to what I've been saying about Aries, you will have heard me talk about Venus being semisquare Pluto. Venus is your ruler. And so when Venus is semisquare Pluto, there might be a little bit of intensity creeping into the situation. You might regard many of the things going on around you as being complicated, not something that can easily be talked about. And you might also be concerned about what might happen if you were to reveal some of your secrets. We all have secrets, and that includes Taurians. These secrets may relate to what you want to do. So perhaps you've got plans and you don't want to tell people about your plans because you might be concerned that they might not take you seriously, or you might be concerned that you might be damaged if you reveal your plans. Someone might steal your plans. That is a possibility. I think you need to respect your own need for secrecy. I think that's fine. If you feel that something shouldn't be revealed, then that's fine. Still, you might experience a bit of pressure from the outside, because if you are keeping something secret, if you're holding something back, then it is likely that the world around you is going to pick up on that. And as a result, you might feel somewhat alienated from the rest of the world. So handling your secrets is important, and you've got to adopt the right method. And it might be best if you find one person who perhaps needs to be confided in, someone who can maybe give you some useful feedback. Or maybe it's not a time where you should really be worrying too much about the world out there, and perhaps instead you should be doing something that is in itself quite secretive. And I think that the full moon today may be encouraging you to do that. It's a reminder that not everything can be done in public. There are some things that they're yours, and you just don't need to tell anyone what you're doing. You just need to get on with it. One warning though, there is some danger, Taurus, that you focus on the wrong details. This is especially the case if you are interacting with people. There may be little surface gestures that you regard as being really important. You hear someone say something, and you haven't really heard the whole conversation. You hear a few words, and you regard that as being incredibly important. But you've only heard a few words, and you haven't heard the whole thing. And as a result, you could jump to the wrong conclusions. It would be better if you were to just pause. Allow things to develop at their own pace. And maybe tomorrow you might get a better understanding of what's going on. Maybe the day after. It will take some time. But it's just very important that it's really important that you don't jump to conclusions. And really, Taurus, that's about it. I think it's just important that you maybe don't take yourself too seriously, but you shouldn't really feel any need to really do anything dramatic, especially if other people are concerned. You should perhaps be watching, and don't over-interpret snippets of information, because they're not the whole truth. They're just part of the truth. You have to wait. You have to watch. Gemini, you are in a situation where you feel that your way of doing things is the right way of doing things. You're quite sure about it. You've worked it through, and you don't really have to explain. At least that's your view at the moment. But, Gemini, I'm not convinced that you really understand what's going on fully. Yes, you are a very creative person. Every Gemini isn't that true? And you may have decided that you're going to exercise your creativity in a particular way, and that's fine. You feel comfortable doing that. And as far as you're concerned, that should be that. But I think that's going to be difficult, not least because of today's full moon. You do have to consider the world around you. You may not want to consider the world around you, but if you were to just do things your way, then I think you're going to get criticism, you're going to get resistance, and some of this criticism may actually be justified. And really, that's if you're lucky. If you're lucky, you're going to get criticized. If you're not lucky, people will just let you just do whatever you want. Well, that would be bad, because if you just did whatever you wanted, then there is a danger that you start making mistakes, because your brain works in its own way. It tells itself everything's fine. It keeps going in a particular direction. And that direction may well be the wrong direction. So it is a situation where you need to get feedback. That is really important. Especially as Mercury, which is your ruler, is conjunct the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. So, as I said earlier on in this video, the Mercury-Neptune midpoint, at least according to Reinhold Ebertin in the combination of stellar influences, can be about the elimination of a waking consciousness. So your logical capacity may not be as good as you think it is. And you may just move into a state of mind where you're not thinking things through, you're just following a script. And when you're following a script, well, there's no feedback anymore. You're just going through the motions. I understand we all follow scripts that, maybe 95% of the time we're following a script. And there is a danger today, Gemini, that you just follow a script. And by the way, don't feel I'm singling you out or that I'm biased against Geminis, because I'm a Gemini myself, so I'm kind of talking to myself as well here. So don't feel upset by this. But there is a danger that you will just follow your own script. You'll follow perhaps your unconscious mind, and you could end up making mistakes. It really is possible. And if you're working today. It's a Monday, beginning of a working week. These mistakes might involve other people and how you respond to other people. And in certain situations, you might find yourself being manipulated. Yeah, I know that's not what Geminis want to hear, because Geminis regard themselves as being clever people who don't get manipulated. But I think that today Geminis are vulnerable to manipulation. They could be told things and they think somehow that, yeah, that sounds right. Maybe they're being told things that perhaps flatter their egos, that sound good. They don't really want to think things through. And yes, they could end up making mistakes. So Gemini, I'm not convinced it's going to be a great day, unless you want to spend a day on hyper-spiritual pursuits. Remember what I said about Mercury being on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. In most cases, that is a difficult combination, having Mercury on Uranus-Neptune midpoint. It's not good for rational thinking. But I suppose if you're a spiritual Gemini and you're on some retreat and you're perhaps in a meditation hall or you're involved in something religious, then yes, you might be very inspired and you might get some really powerful insights about what's going on in the world and your place in it. But in most cases, I don't think that's going to be the case. So overall, Gemini, I think it's a day when you do have to be careful. Cancer. There is a full moon today. And being a Cancerian, you are quite sensitive to the lunar cycle. You pick up on the energy of a full moon very easily, very quickly. And with this full moon energy, you can find yourself shifting from one extreme to another. You know, the moon is in Libra. Your ruling planet is in Libra. Now, you might say that your immediate inclination here, Cancer, is to follow the crowd. Libra is a very sociable sign. It's about balance, and you might take the view that really it's all about keeping everyone happy. That's what you want to do. That is certainly a worthy thing to be wanting to do, but is it the right thing to be wanting to do? I am not entirely convinced. While I do understand that keeping everyone happy to an extent is useful, you don't want to have your life disintegrating into sort of arguments and chaos and fights. That's reasonable. But if you try too hard to compromise, you may be undermining yourself, and you may be moving into a situation where you end up not really having very much freedom because other people are calling the shots. And the challenge here is to project yourself outwards into the outside world and be clear that you're the one that needs to be respected. Because at the moment, the sun is in Aries. And from a Cancerian perspective, the sun in Aries is out there. It can be connected with leadership, being someone who has authority. And you mustn't be afraid of leadership and authority. You can be a leader wherever you are. Okay, you may not be working, you may be at home, you may be with your friends, you may be involved in some collective action, whatever that might be. But your your instincts are right. And I think it is very important that you are taken seriously and that people listen to you. You know, if you were to compromise, then that would spoil things. I understand that you're as a Cancerian, you always tend to put a great premium on stability, and that is fine. But don't worry too much about stability. Indeed, if you start to obsess about stability, you might actually lose stability, strange as that might sound. Now, you can't expect everything to go to plan. You know, the Sun is making a semisquare to Uranus. So when you start to interact with the world out there, you are going to create waves. That's inevitable. And those waves may cause changes that you weren't expecting. But I wouldn't worry about it. You have to go with it. And there may be a certain sense of risk there. And I understand you may be risk averse. But it does seem, Cancer, that there is something that needs to be done. You have to be there. You have to perhaps make an effort to direct people. Because once you really show the world what you want and what you can do, I think, Cancer, that by and large you will be listened to. So overall, Cancer, I would say it's a challenging day, but it's a day when you have a real chance to make an impact. And in the end, I think it will be a fortunate impact. Leo, the Sun is your ruler. Sun rules Leo. And the Sun is conjunct the Mercury-Venus midpoint. Now, this conjunction between the Sun and the Mercury-Venus midpoint has been going on for a bit of time. Reason being because the Sun, Mercury and Venus are quite fast-moving planets, and so they all move together. And so the midpoint moves together. But it's just important that you take advantage of this while it's still operational. Mercury and Venus as a pair are very talented. They can be associated with artistic skill, with business skill, with creating something of lasting value. I suppose Mercury is about the mind. Venus is about the world out there. When Mercury and Venus come together, they can create something that the world out there finds very appealing. It's therefore very important, Leo, that right now you don't underestimate yourself, because there really is a lot you can achieve. And it's important that you are forward-thinking, especially as today there is a full moon. This full moon is in fact on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. It's a very creative full moon, and it's especially creative for you. But there is a certain temptation to get caught up in factual details. The moon is in Libra. It's moving towards a conjunction of the South Node. You might think that you've got to consider this fact and that fact, and you've got to consider what this person says and what that person says, and you've got to bring it all together. And you might take the view, oh, well, you can't do anything really special, really amazing yet, because you've got to consider what all these people are talking about. And maybe you're going to think, oh, you've got to read some stuff as well. Maybe you don't know enough. Read this, read that. Maybe look at the odd YouTube video, whatever you need to do. It's all garbage, really. I mean, today it's all garbage. What you need to be thinking about is the bigger picture that goes beyond the garbage. And that links with the sun in Aries. The sun is your ruler. It's conjunct the North Node. From a Leo perspective, Aries is a forward-thinking sign, which is about breaking boundaries. It doesn't want to get caught up in factual details or worrying about what this person says or what that person says. You've got to see the answer. And that links with the fact that, Leo, you are a fire sign. Fire as a sign is intuitive. That's what Carl Jung associated, I think, the fire signs with intuition. Intuition is about seeing the answer. You just see where it's all going. You don't have to think about it. You just know where it's all going. It's clear. Jung was a Leo, wasn't he? Jung famously said that he doesn't believe that God exists. He knows that God exists. And it's likewise for you. You just know the answers. That's the way it should be. And because if you just get caught up in facts, basically you'll get nowhere. Facts, arguments, that's not the way forward. Now, I'm not telling you to be completely crazy. You've got to understand that I'm looking at the big picture. Certain facts matter, sure. You have to be aware that 2 + 2 = 4, but you understand what I mean. The big picture for Leo is really very important for you. Now, it could be said that you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. I mean, people like that line, don't they? It's very nice and callous. But I think, Leo, to an extent that might be true for you at the moment, because the sun is a semisquare Uranus. Remember, the sun is your ruler. It's semisquare Uranus. Uranus is about breaking eggs. It's about stirring things up. And it may be that your creativity and your path forward and what you need to do is disruptive. And maybe that can't be helped. There will be resistance, perhaps. People might not like what you're doing. You might get criticism, but is that your fault? And that may be the sense in which you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. Within reason, of course. I'm not suggesting you cause anyone real damage. It's just that not everyone is going to approve of what you're doing, and you shouldn't be hunting for approval. Not today. Virgo. As a Virgo, you like everything to be fairly well organized. At least that's a sort of stereotypical view of being a Virgo. You like to know what's going to happen next. And what you don't want to have is chaos, things just happening out of the blue. But today, there is some danger that might happen, and you might be inclined to blame other people. But maybe the fundamental reason for this is the fact that Mercury, which is your ruler, Mercury rules Virgo, Mercury is conjunct the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. I've already talked about this, when I was talking to Gemini, because Gemini has Mercury as its ruler, and you have Mercury as your ruler, and Mercury and the Uranus-Neptune midpoint can be about, as Eberton said, the elimination of a waking consciousness. Just not being fully conscious, not being fully aware of what's going on. Things are happening behind the scenes which you just don't notice. I mean, you should be noticing, but you don't notice. You're very focused on details. You know details are important. You get all the details. But maybe there are certain emotional details that you just completely miss. You see different things going on, but you don't make the connections. And you just accept things as they are, and you keep going in a particular direction. And in the end, you mess things up, and you find yourself in a situation where you don't know what's going on. It's like perhaps waking up and you're wondering, how did it get to where we are? It's like, is it Rumpelstiltskin? I get confused. Who is that person that they were asleep for centuries? Then you wake up. That may be a bit like you. Okay, not centuries. It may be enough to be asleep for 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, a lot can happen. So you've got to stay awake today, Virgo. And staying awake means awake not just to what's going on materially, but what's going on emotionally. You need to see things elapsing and happening and changing. Be aware of those changes. And that means you need to elevate yourself and be prepared to focus on things which are perhaps not easy to focus on. Remembering that Mercury, which is on the Uranus-Neptune midpoint, is currently in Aries. And from a Virgo perspective, Aries can be a sign that is quite emotional, it's quite introspective, is going under the surface. And you have to be aware about what is going on under the surface all the time. I know you want things to be simple, but it's not a simple day. So you have to be wide awake, but at the same time, you must be ready to deal with complicated issues, and your awakeness must extend to all levels. That, I think, Virgo, is the way forward. And if you can cope with that, if you can constantly monitor what's going on under the surface, kind of like a seismograph, just always watching what's going on under the surface, and when there's an earthquake, you pick it up straight away and you act accordingly. And yes, there could be earthquake-like events, not affecting you, but just going on around you. Okay, not affecting you directly, but remember there's a full moon today, and it's a semisquare Uranus. This full moon is a bit destabilizing for everyone, not just you, everyone. And if you can be the seismograph, we all need a seismograph, and if you can just monitor what's going on, then you may be in a position to respond appropriately. And that means knowing what's going on, realizing something's happening, and act. You must act accordingly. And this might actually have a financial dimension, because today there is a full moon, and this full moon is across the finance axis of your chart. And there may be an awareness about some financial detail, a complicated financial detail, not just connected with your everyday personal finance, but some more complicated aspect, perhaps joint finances. Traditionally, we might associate this with legacies, trusts, things that things are difficult to deal with. So there might be some event financially, maybe not just today, but over the next couple of weeks, that perhaps takes you by surprise. Or it may not be an event, it just may be about awareness. You need to really understand the financial picture. Be prepared to go deep. Really understand it. It's not something you want to do, but I think it might be worth your while. Libra, you seem to take the view today that you should be in control. You understand things. You understand perhaps the way rules work, governments work, laws work. And on the basis of that, you may feel that you're in a position where you can actually lay down the law. Now, that might sound very strange. This is not normal Libran behavior. Though, I suppose Libra does have an association with the law, but we sometimes forget. What's the picture of, what's on, is it the Old Bailey in London? You have justice being blind, holding the scales. And you understand the law better than other people today. And it may occur to you that someone is doing something that is perhaps not lawful. Or it may occur to you that there is a legal implication that no one else has been aware of, but you suddenly become aware of this legal implication. And this does actually put you at an advantage. So do consider that as a possibility. At the same time, the moon is moving through your sign. And in a way, that's good, because with the moon moving through Libra, you feel that you understand the world. You feel that you can balance yourself to whatever's going on around you, and that somehow you're in the right place. But it's important that you're not complacent. I think there is a danger of complacency here. You may feel that you've understood it, and now that you've understood it, you can just relax. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case, because there is a full moon. The moon may be in Libra, but the sun is also in Aries. The moon and sun are in opposition. There are people out there who you have to consider, who you must consider. Even if you don't like them, if you don't want to have anything to do with them, you still have to consider what impact they have on you. And you have to consider the possibility that the truth is out there. The truth may be about to be revealed. After all, full moons are about the truth. They're about seeing the big picture. And with a full moon across the main axis of your chart, it has to be the main axis of your chart, doesn't it? Moon in Libra, sun in Aries, that is the main axis. And you can see it. You can see it all. It's all there for you. But the question is, when you see the full picture, what are you going to do? I think that many Librans are going to look away. I don't think you want to know about it. I think you might take the view that if you look away, it will sort itself out all on its own. And I don't think that's true. If, for example, you have seen someone for what they are, you've seen a little glimpse of their personality, that's it. You've seen what they're like. If you ignore that fact, the person is not going to change. That revelation is not going to somehow cancel itself out. It will still be there. And if you see someone's personality for what it really is, you need to accept that. And it may be that you need to make adjustments. Maybe some people are no good for you. Of course, it could work the other way. You might see that someone really could be good for you, but you should be having a lot more to do with them. But for some reason, you don't want to. You feel that it's too complicated. So it does work both ways. But yes, you are seeing people for what they are. But the question is, are you going to act on that? Because I think there is a certain danger of laziness here. Laziness not in the sense of doing nothing, but it's just too complicated to take big initiatives. You don't want to do that. That's not something you want to do, particularly in the social realm. I should also point out that Venus which is your ruler, is semisquare Pluto. And with Venus semisquare Pluto, there could be complications between you and other people. And I think it actually feeds in what I've just been talking about. You get a glimpse into what people are really like. And that does hint at complications. And these complications in terms of some of your relationships may be with Venus semisquare Pluto. You may try to ignore them and pretend it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And I think you have to accept that your relationship with certain people is becoming complicated. It's not what you thought it was going to be like to begin with. You're maybe seeing a new side to someone's personality. Your feelings are telling you this as well. But again, there's some danger that you might want to just pretend that it will all go away. Well, I don't think it will go away. But Libra, if you're honest with yourself, if you're ruthlessly honest with yourself, and you accept the insights that are coming your way, and you act on these insights, then I think today can be the start of something very constructive. Scorpio. Scorpios are pleasant people. I mean, that might sound like a rather strange thing to say. I mean, Scorpios do have a bad reputation. Every sign has a bad reputation at some level, at some time. Sometimes it's Geminis have a bad reputation. They're everyone's worst sign. Sometimes it's Scorpio, sometimes it's Virgo. But yeah, as I said, Scorpios are pleasant people, particularly now. They are pleasant people. After all, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio. And Mars is aspecting the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. Venus-Jupiter is the two benefics. Venus is the lesser benefic. Jupiter is the greater benefic. Mars is aspecting the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So, Scorpio, you have the capacity to make people's life a lot better. You can present people with a new vision, and you can be very encouraging. And this is not just about today, it's about what's going on in general at the moment. And I would just encourage you to just keep going with this. Even if people don't want to be helped, you can help them. You can really make people feel better about themselves. So do continue on that vein. But you don't have to be right there all the time. There can be a time when you take a step back. If people need you, you are there, but you don't have to make a big thing about it, particularly today when there's a full moon. I think, Scorpio, this full moon is fairly introspective for you. Reason being, the full moon is in Libra. Libra is the sign just before Scorpio. And so if you've got the moon in Libra, its opposition the sun in Aries. And Aries, again, is in a fairly low-profile sector of your chart, more connected with quiet organization, perhaps focusing on your health and well-being. And perhaps you need to accept that situation. So by all means, help other people in a gentle way. Be there if you need to be there. But at the same time, it might be a good idea if you were to slow things down a little. Do things that you feel comfortable with, and avoid chaos. Moon in Libra can be a bit chaotic, especially if you're a Scorpio. Perhaps trying too hard to deal with different pressures and opening up new lines of inquiry, and it just gets a bit much. And really, Scorpio, what you need today, what really matters today, is simplicity. Just keep it simple. And that may not always be easy. There could be interruptions. Yes, you have to consider what other people are saying, not least because Venus in the Scorpio chart relates to other people. After all, Taurus is your opposite sign, Venus rules Taurus, and Venus at the moment is semisquare Pluto. And with Venus semisquare Pluto, some people want attention, but some people want a lot of attention, a huge amount of attention. They might want all of your attention. You can give them that attention if you really wanted to, but it would be completely exhausting. So don't spend too long with any one person. Yeah, you can be a nice person, but if you want to be a nice person, that means not giving over all your time to one person, because if you give everything over to one other party, then you've got no time for anyone else, and you've certainly got no time for yourself. And you have to get that balance right, and that's really important. And what is most important for you, Scorpio, is your own space, making sure that you are somewhere where everything is well organized, and also where you are fairly shock-proof. Being shock-proof is important because the sun is semisquare Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus. Taurus is your opposite sign, and there can be things coming in from the outside which are surprising and which are disruptive. And so, Scorpio, you have to be prepared for that, and you need to have a bit of flexibility, and also don't exaggerate. So if you hear something you weren't expecting or see something you weren't expecting, don't immediately panic. It is not personal, I don't think. Everyone has this full moon, which is semisquare sesquiquadrate Uranus. So everyone has the potential for being shocked today, and that includes you. And so if something happens that you weren't expecting, don't drop everything. Perhaps just continue as per normal and just say, well, this is a world in which we all live. Sagittarius. Don't spend too much time on social activities. I think that you are going to want to spend time on social activities. It will be your line of least resistance. Lots of people to deal with. You might as well interact with them. It seems amusing. But there are better things to be doing. You need to be concentrating today on yourself and on what you can do. You have a set of unique abilities. These are the kind of abilities that can't be shared. You have to do things your way. And if you were to spend too much time with other people, doing stuff, for example, in a team, in a group, so I suppose that might apply to your work, perhaps. People talk about teamwork, being in a team, working on something. Could apply just as much to what's going on in your socially and with your friends. If you're working in a team, you are not going to be performing very well. Your abilities will just get diluted into nothing, and you will just become part of the crowd. By contrast, if you are entirely focused on yourself and what you can do, then you're really going to come into your own. At the same time, I think you are going to surprise both yourself and others with what you come up with and what you decide is appropriate. You're not someone who's just going to just go with the flow and be looking for a happy world. No, it's not like that. You can be a disruptor. And I think it's the right thing at the moment, Sagittarius, for you to be a disruptor. And when you interact with people, you really can be effective, but again, also disruptive. So people need to know what they're taking on when they come into your orbit. When people come into your orbit, they are there to listen to you and to become part of your world, perhaps with you being the sun in the middle of it all. It's not about you being a planet revolving around another person. That's not what it's about. It's about you being the sun and people making a decision that they want to be part of you, and they're prepared to take the full consequences of being part of your universe. If that's what they want to do, fine. But again, it's not a time when you should be doing things other people's way. And I expect that some people should probably be avoided. There are some people out there who really don't know what they're doing, and they are very confused, and they've got a lot of false impressions. And if you were to listen to them, you could waste a lot of your time. You might feel that you have to correct someone's false impressions. And that's going to be tough, because certain people are very set in their ways. They have ideas about the world, about the universe. Maybe they have even ideas about you, which are completely incorrect. You know it's incorrect, but you can't tell them because they won't listen. And so in that sense, Sagittarius, you have to be very discerning in who you mix with. And if in doubt, you shouldn't mix with anyone, because I think today you are pretty self-reliant. You know what you want to do, you know what you have to do, if you go and do it, I think that you'll accomplish a great deal. What you don't want is distractions and time wasting. Capricorn, you at the moment feel an obligation to be noticed. I mean, you've got something to offer. Capricorns actually have always got something to offer. But with today's full moon, there is a warning that if you make yourself too prominent, then you might actually get a negative response. It may just be difficult for you to accomplish anything. And maybe also you're revealing too much about yourself. So, in spite of the temptations, in spite of any feelings of obligation, it may be that you should take a step back with this full moon. You understand the world out there. That's great. You even understand the kind of mistakes that people are making, and you might then believe that it's your obligation to sort of step in, sort things out. But I don't know, if you do that, you might just get involved with someone else's problems, and maybe instead, Capricorn, what you should be doing is retreating a little, putting yourself in a position where you are unassailable, where you're really strong. And if that means that people don't know what you're doing, if people can't get hold of you, then maybe that's okay. But I should say, though, you are influential today. People are going to listen to you. And maybe that's a problem, because if you were to sort of go out there in the world, perhaps to have a high profile, maybe at work or in whatever organization you might be involved with, if you were to adopt that high profile, sure, people would listen to you. But I don't think they would really understand what you were asking them to do. And you might find that if you keep giving people advice, you have to give more people advice, you have to give people leadership because they're confused. It could just end up as being a big problem, and if things do go wrong, you might end up getting the blame. So I think taking a step back is important, but also understanding your ability to have an influence, because I think really today you are influential, but it must be on your terms. I think people need to make the effort to seek you out, and you don't want to make it too easy. I suppose the symbol that might best fit today might be, I don't know, a hermit or a sage in some cave on a mountain. Yeah, it's really difficult finding you. Make it difficult, because the more difficult it is to find you, the more credibility you have. You're not available for everyone, and you only want to communicate seriously with people who have made the effort. Because if people haven't made the effort, then your words don't have as much value. And so I think that might be how you should look at today. And it's really all about the full moon, because this full moon does have an impact on you. And you're starting to realize how people are seeing you. And I think you're also perhaps realizing that maybe in the past you have been taken for granted, especially from a work career perspective. Of course, if you're not working, then it's going to be a bit different. But still, you have a role in society. We all have roles in society, and there may be just something about that role in society which has led to a situation where, you feel that you've been taken for granted, and I don't think that that is acceptable, and I don't think that that is something you should accept. You need to create something new with this full moon. You need to reimagine yourself, and that means perhaps having a period of time, maybe as long as a couple of weeks, where you deliberately make yourself unavailable, or not fully unavailable, but make yourself hard to find. And that doesn't mean that you literally have to move into a cave on a mountain. You don't actually have to change your routine. You can keep going to places you have to go to. You can, for example, if you're going into work, no changes on the outside, but in terms of how you are treating people around you, it's just you are withdrawing something. You're not so free with your advice. You are making yourself unobtainable. Because if you are making yourself unobtainable, you are making yourself special. And perhaps that's the message of the full moon for Capricorns. Aquarius, don't get too caught up on your own wonderful ideas. Some of your wonderful ideas may not be quite as wonderful as you thought they were. And I suppose that's connected with you as an Aquarius. You are in many respects an idea person. You like to have some broad principle or philosophy which guides your life. And it's very unique to you. And it is possible that unique philosophy, that unique way in which you've been leading your life, is in some way flawed. It may not have been flawed to begin with. It may have been fine. But things have changed. And as a result of changes, what you believe in may no longer hold true, or at least some of it may no longer hold true. And today's full moon is asking you to reconsider. That doesn't mean you have to make any changes, but you just have to reconsider. Consider what are the most important beliefs for you. They could be political beliefs, they could be spiritual beliefs, religious beliefs, whatever it is, whatever guides you. You've got something a little wrong, or it has become wrong because of external changes, and be ready to research the matter. Look at the facts again. Look at the very basis of your belief. And I think beliefs. And I think that if you are honest with yourself, then you will be able to make a few changes. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to have a complete conversion, that you have to turn everything you believe in upside down. It may just be about fine-tuning. And this full moon, it's showing you the truth. It's showing the truth to everyone. But for you, it's showing you the truth in a particular way. You're being shown what's wrong with some of your beliefs, and you're also being shown what the real answers are. And perhaps one doesn't really like to talk about the truth, because I suppose we're in a bit of a post-truth era, aren't we, where it's unfashionable to talk about the truth, that there's no such thing as the truth, that everything is relative. Well, that may be the case, but for you right now, there are your own truths, and some of your own truths just do need to be adjusted. And the full moon should help you. And you need to be very firm about it. And I suppose the problem might be if you are surrounded by people who share a set of truths, and you're the one that realizes that you've all got it wrong. And if you tell people what you think, what you're starting to understand, you might get a negative reaction. You might be afraid that you might fall out with other people if you were to start to mess with the truth. You might, if you hear something that, if you tell someone something that is at odds with what they believe in, then they might just ghost you. It's possible. But I think that finding the truth is worth doing. It's right for you at the moment. And finding the truth is largely about hard work and research and being able to think about things, having the courage to think about things. I should say something about relationships. Relationships are all about the sun in some ways, because the sun rules Leo, your opposite sign, and the sun is at the moment semisquare Uranus. So if the sun is semisquare Uranus, that does mean that some of the people close to you are capable of strange behavior, doing things that you don't expect. It's therefore important that you do not have expectations about people, particularly the people close to you. They could do things that you hadn't planned on doing things. They might say something that on the surface is a little bit upsetting. But maybe that's a good thing. And it may actually go back to what I was talking about in terms of trying to find out what is the right truth for you. And it may be that someone else's behavior is challenging because it actually questions your fundamental beliefs. And so it could be that change doesn't just come through research and through thinking, it comes through your social interactions. It might be a little disturbing to begin with, but I think it's by and large very healthy. And I think at the same time, once you start to realize things and once you start to engage with people, not everyone is, of course, going to be able to accept what you say, but in your own way today, Aquarius, you can be very convincing. You are a good arguer. You know how to manipulate through words. I suppose you can twist the words around, and you can present new facts in ways that are compelling. And in certain cases, you can change someone's mind about an important matter. And I suppose the first thing to do is, can you use your words to change your own mind, and can you use your words to change other people's minds? Because maybe that's perhaps today, changing minds is what it's all about. Somewhere, someone has to change their mind. And maybe that someone is you, maybe it's someone else, maybe you and someone else, you both have to change your minds. Pisces, it is a day when you mustn't make things too complicated. I mean, there is a temptation, Pisces, to spend a lot of time thinking about all the things that can happen, all the various possibilities, and in the end just getting completely overwhelmed. And you end up just not having a clue what's going on. That's possible. It needn't happen like that. You just have to keep it simple, and you need to focus on what is right in front of you, what you can feel intuitively. That first realization is probably the right realization. Isn't that always the case when you engage with some new subject, that often the first impulse is the best impulse? The first impulse is the right impulse. Then you have this thought, you come up with the answer, then you think about it, and then you think, well, maybe it's not like this, and maybe it's actually more complicated than that. And what starts as a right answer ends as a completely wrong answer. So that first impulse, Pisces, is, I think, in most cases going to be the right impulse. So rather than spend all day trying to work something out and coming up with a wrong solution, it might be better to just spend 5 seconds just coming up with the first solution that comes to you. And in many cases, that's going to be the solution to go for. And I think you would be unwise to listen too hard to what other people are saying, particularly today. Some people really haven't got a clue. They think they know the answers, but there's a lot of muddled-headedness around. People just going around in circles, causing confusion. You listen to them, and maybe you change your mind, and you change your mind again, and in the end, you get absolutely nowhere. And I just think you have to be clear, and you have to be assertive, remembering, Pisces, that Mars is in your sign. Now, Mars went into Pisces just before the weekend, but perhaps today, Monday, is the first working day where Mars is definitely in your sign. And Mars in Pisces is very assertive. And it should be. Be clear. Particularly also when you've got a full moon. Be very clear about what you want and how you want it done. And that, I think, Pisces, is the way forward. And in the process, I think you can meet people, you can interact with people, but you can't interact with everyone because, as I've just said, some people haven't got a clue what's going on. And ideally, it will be you taking the initiative, not just not doing what other people say. Because if you just end up doing what other people say, then I really am not convinced that you will get anything done. So that's the day. It's not perhaps the best day, but it's just a day when you need to be gently assertive, and overall I think the first solution in most cases is probably going to be the best solution. That's the astrology, and now I want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is a Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 8, which is holding together. The Wilhelm translation of the I Ching has holding together, and in parentheses it says union. This is telling us that if we want to get anything done, if we want to be successful today, then perhaps we can't do it on our own. We need to be with people. These people can help us in many different ways, and we shouldn't be afraid of linking up with someone or a group of people who are perhaps outside our usual circle of friends and associates. We may have to sort of take a leap to somewhere unusual to find supporters, allies, because we do have this opportunity here. But sort of holding together does have a certain implication that there is some kind of external threat, that we can't deal with this threat on our own. We need to band together with other people. And it goes back to that phrase, was it Benjamin Franklin or said something like this at the time of the American Revolution? If we don't hang together, then we'll hang separately. So we get that kind of feel with this hexagram, that we need to be with people, and we also need to get the moment right, because if we don't get the moment right, we'll miss an opportunity to have a really quite valuable alliance. So there is an alliance out there, but it's that opportunity to get together with a crucial person who could be really useful. There's a real danger that we miss that opportunity. I mean, I think that the I Ching is almost suggesting we probably will miss the opportunity, but it's pointing it out. So it wouldn't be pointing it out if it wasn't saying that there was some opportunity, if there wasn't some possibility of being able to make that key linkage with another person who could really help us. And this hexagram, it does move. Holding together moves to hexagram 16. Now, the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching calls this enthusiasm. And Greg Winkup, in his translation of I Ching, he calls it contentment. And I think that contentment is more suitable. Now, I should apologize. This top line is a little bit messed up because I just realized that my library of hexagrams that I'd put together there was a mistake there, so I had to sort of black it in to say that top line. That top line is it's unbroken. So in the Wilhelm translation, we get this idea of enthusiasm, and that sounds good. We're enthusiastic about something. It's not to say we're going to get it, but we're just feeling that we're ready to go. It's going to happen. We're being optimistic. Greg Winkup uses a different word, contentment, and contentment is not so fortunate as enthusiasm because it indicates a little bit of complacency. We think everything is fine. Maybe looking at that previous hexagram of union, we've talked to people, we've got together with people, we've got some good ideas, things seem to be on the mend, we're feeling content, but secretly we know that there's a problem. And I think that links with the fact that there's a full moon. The full moon is offering us the truth, but that doesn't mean to say that doesn't mean to say that we will take the truth. We may just ignore it. And contentment, it's just easier to say that everything's going to be fine, but deep down we know it's not fine. And the advice here is we have to start preparing for things to get worse. And don't take this personally. A lot of people are in this situation. Things are going to get worse. Maybe it's to do with the economy, something else happening. And if we just do nothing, then this moment of contentment might degenerate into a moment, into disappointment or panic or whatever, just because we weren't properly prepared. So don't be content. Don't rest on your laurels. Take the view that things are possibly going to get worse and start preparing for it. And through that preparation, you may be able to avoid the problem. But don't worry, this is just an I Ching reading for one day. It's not meant to be telling you about what the rest of a year or what the rest of a decade is going to be like. So do get some perspective on this. Finally, I want to look at the tragedy in Krasnogorsk, where, I don't know, something like 150 people were killed in this terrorist attack. Supposedly, ISIS have claimed responsibility for it, although the perpetrators of the attack were apparently heading west when they were arrested. They were trying to escape Russia through Ukraine. Now, just because they were trying to escape Russia through Ukraine doesn't mean that Ukraine was involved with it. But there is a story that some vector had been opened up on the Ukrainian border to allow these people to safely get through. That is one possibility. So yeah, we don't really know, but at the moment ISIS have claimed responsibility for this. And let's look at some charts. So top right, that is a map of that part of Russia. So I will firstly look at the attack itself, which I believe happened at around 8 o'clock on the evening of March the 22nd. You can see that we had 15 Libra rising, and we had the South Node. The South Node was on the ascendant, and Mars was sesquiquadrate the ascendant, and it was sesquiquadrate the node. I mean, I suppose that kind of fits. Mars in the 5th house, you could say that Mars attacking a concert hall. Concert hall, I suppose, is a very 5th house thing. It's about sort of public entertainment. And Mars sesquiquadrate the ascendant is very much sort of fitting that. Also, Venus is conjunct Saturn. Now, I did want to say something about Venus conjunct Saturn in regard to Princess Catherine's diagnosis of her cancer diagnosis when the public found out about it. I thought the Venus conjunct Saturn kind of fitted that, certainly in terms of England. So in the England chart, Venus, England's Venus is at 29 Capricorn, and so when we heard that Kate was ill at the beginning of the year, Pluto was conjunct England's Venus, and then we got this diagnosis when Venus, being Kate, was conjunct Saturn. But in the Crocus attack, it's also Venus conjunct Saturn in the 5th house. Venus is about entertainment, and it's conjunct Saturn. So Venus should be working very well, exalted in Pisces, but the conjunct Saturn messes things up. But what makes this like specific to Krasnogorsk, which is this town, I think it's pretty much a suburb of Moscow, is the condition of Mercury and the midheaven. So you will notice that Mercury is square the midheaven. Now that in itself is not a big deal, but what is a big deal is the fact that Mercury and the midheaven are on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So there is Mars and Saturn. So you can see that their midpoint would be at around 6 Pisces. So 6 Pisces would be the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Mercury is pretty much semisquare the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and the midheaven is sesquiquadrate the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So that may say something about the attack. Mars-Saturn is the death pair. So if you've got Mercury on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, that might be news about death. And then you link Mercury with the midheaven. That's just saying what's happening in that city when it happened. And the South Node is conjunct the ascendant. It's not good having the South Node conjunct the ascendant. The South Node is a malefic. Of course, the South Node will be on the conjunct the ascendant every day, and that's not a big deal. But I suppose when you've got Mars sesquiquadrate the South Node, that makes it that much more difficult. So that's a chart of the Crocus attack. So what other charts should we be looking at? I would have said that one chart to look at would be the prenatal or the pre-event new moon. So looking at the lunation before the attack, this is that's Vladimir Putin's that's a full moon. This one. Right, this is the lunation prior to the attack. And Saturn is conjunct the midheaven. So we can see this in an astrocartography map. Now I did point this out that the midheaven was going through Moscow. I think when I looked at this a couple of weeks back, I mean I didn't make any speculation about what that might mean. I was thinking, midheaven going through Moscow. Well, it must be something to do with the war in Ukraine. I mean, what else? I mean, maybe something bad would go on, particularly in the run up to the elections. I wasn't really thinking in terms of this kind of event, but if we look at the prenatal, the lunation prior to the event, we can see that Saturn was right on the midheaven. So that perhaps had something to do with it, and it's certainly something that we needed to consider. Another thing about that Venus conjunct Saturn is the horoscope for Beslan. Now, I don't know if you remember Beslan. Beslan was a school in Russia, and it was invaded by Islamic militants, and they killed, I don't know, these children and teachers and others, and parents were kept hostage. It was the first day of term, September the 1st, 2004. And here's the chart for Beslan. And I believe it happened about 9 o'clock in the morning. What's kind of interesting about the Beslan chart is, September the 1st, 2024, is that there was a Venus-Saturn conjunction at the time of the Beslan attack. And there was also a Venus-Saturn conjunction, as we've just seen, at the time of the Crocus attack. A Libra was rising at the time of the Beslan attack, and Libra was rising at the time of the Crocus City Hall attack. So there are a few echoes between between these two charts, the chart of Beslan and the chart of City Hall. I mean, it's not quite as dramatic as Beslan, not least because Beslan lasted for a few days. I remember everyone was watching it on the news. The Beslan siege. It was an ongoing news item because it lasted for so long. Whereas with the Crocus City Hall, it was over very quickly. And so it happened in Krasnogorsk. Now, Krasnogorsk does have a horoscope. It has two horoscopes. So it's a modern city. And so this is a chart of Krasnogorsk. It was apparently set up on April the 10th, 1932. I got that from Wikipedia. The English language Wikipedia didn't have it, so I went to the Russian language and pressed the translate button. And April the 10th, 1932 was when Krasnogorsk was founded. What I homed in on with this chart, I don't have a time for when it was founded, but at its founding, Venus was square Neptune. So Venus square Neptune, you might associate with people going to a concert. Venus square Neptune. Venus is about, as I said, it's maybe about public entertainment, square Neptune. Of course, Krasnogorsk always has that in its chart. Then we might want to consider the prenatal. So that's a link with the. Well, we could also look at the lunation. So at the time of the attack, the moon was at 4:35 Virgo. So there was 4:35. So it was on Krasnogorsk's Neptune, and it was square Krasnogorsk Venus. So this Venus square Neptune was being triggered by the moon in Virgo. Now, this will happen every month. So you could say, well, maybe that's not such a big deal. On the other hand, if we look at the full moon prior to... Oh, that's not that one, that's the wrong... Oh yes, I think... If we look at the full moon before the attack... Oh, hold on, let's go to the... Sorry, let's... Full moon before the attack. Hold on, get there. There we are. Right, there's the full moon before the attack. The full moon was at 5:23 Virgo. So this attack happened with the moon exactly on at 5 Virgo. So the full moon was hitting Krasnogorsk's was hitting Krasnogorsk exactly. It was hitting Krasnogorsk's. Let me just put that in. Full moon Krasnogorsk. There we are. Sorry about all of that. So the full moon was on Krasnogorsk Neptune, exactly, and it was also square Krasnogorsk Venus. And the attack happened a month later when the moon was also on Krasnogorsk Venus. So I think we're seeing perhaps the Krasnogorsk horoscope for April the 10th, 1932, 1932 actually being activated. But there's one other chart to consider, and that is the chart for when Krasnogorsk became a city. So Krasnogorsk became a city in 1940. And so here is a chart for Krasnogorsk as a city. And this is a reminder that when we're doing astrology of nations, cities, we shouldn't necessarily just look at one chart. We should look at several charts. And this is the chart for Krasnogorsk becoming a city. And you will notice that Krasnogorsk became a city on October the 7th, 1940. So we might want to consider Krasnogorsk's solar return for when the sun returned to where it was on October the 7th, 1940. And so here is its solar return. And I was looking at this solar return and I was thinking, well, this solar return has a square between Mars and Pluto. And then I was thinking, oh, that sounds familiar. And I think there's a connection here, because October the 7th was, of course, the day in which Hamas had this huge attack on Israel, in which thousands of people were killed. And, of course, in the first instance, thousands of Israelis were killed, a couple of thousand Israelis were killed. And then, of course, Israel retaliated, and we still have this ongoing Gaza war. And in a way, what happened in Gaza on October the 7th, 2023, was fairly similar to what happened with this Crocus City Hall. You had this group of people came in and they just shot everything up. They were trying to kill as many people as possible. This is similar behavior from what we saw from Hamas on October the 7th of last year. And October the 7th of last year was the solar return of Krasnogorsk as a city. And I somehow think that's important. Would one have been able to work that out in hindsight? I don't think so. So those are some thoughts on this attack at the Crocus City Hall. Obviously, it's a great tragedy. And I suppose my treatment of it has been pretty chaotic. But I've looked at these several charts, yet again in a fairly chaotic way, but I hope you were able to bear with me. I should have been a bit better organised, but I hope nonetheless that you were able to find that of some use. So yes, thank you very much for hearing me out. If you're still here, I suppose if you're still listening to me, you are still here. And if you did enjoy this video, I would of course be grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed it and you're not subscribed, then of course I'd be grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.